welcome everyone to Archaic Knowledge Podcast today. And today we have a very unique and special guest, Tony Rodrigues. He is the author of 2 books. In fact, I happen to have them right here. I don't buy books usually, but I had to buy these books. Project Star Maker is the second book. Series Colony Cavalier is his first book. And I was drawn to these books very strongly. And I hope that Tony can tell us a little bit about his time in these very unique programs that he was brought into. Tony is a regular guy, just like you and me. He grew up in the forests of Michigan, playing with other children, just like we did when we were children, and probably catching frogs and talking to deer or whatever you did out in the forest. He's not a crazy person, as some people make him out to be. He's not a writer of science fiction. He's telling us his story, his testimonial, and testimonials are evidence. Tony Rodrigues, welcome to Archaic Knowledge.
Doc and Raz, thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here. Good to see you again.
Awesome, yeah. We are interested in your journey. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened when you were 9 years old?
So it was that school year between 9 and 10 years old. And when I had my memories back, I narrowed it down to that school year, the 4th grade school year. But when I looked at it after years, a few years went by, and I really started to reconstruct what happened. It was April of '82. So I was 10 years old then. And during that school year, I was in a talented and gifted program, the TAG program. Was advanced learning. We were the top 5% of kids in the school. So I had really good grades back then. We met every Wednesday in the library for like 10 in the morning. We'd get excused from our class, the kids that were in the TAG program, and we'd walk to the library and meet there. There was one of the kids, and then our school was separated into upstairs and downstairs. So there were like 3 levels. The kids on the downstairs level stayed together and they did recess together and all that. And we were on the upstairs and separate. One of the kids from the downstairs area was very bright and abrasive, maybe. And so I was abrasive back. We didn't get along. So we kind of had a rivalry going, and he didn't like me and I didn't like him. But he says one day, "My dad's an Illuminati. What's your dad do?" And I said, "Well, my dad works for General Motors. He's got a great job. I'm very proud of it." I had no idea. I was like, "What is your dad, like a banker? So what does that mean?" And he didn't elaborate, but he was like very condescending about it. And in April of that year was the science fair, and the kids from the talented and gifted program were the ones that submitted science fair projects. So we set up in the cafeteria, and his dad volunteered to come in and be a judge. It was a Wednesday morning, and I was setting up my exhibit, and I walked by them, and he said, "Dad, that's that boy I told you about." And the one that ruined my confidence, because I had picked on him. And they had some weird conversation with words. I didn't know what they were talking about me directly in front of me as if I weren't there, or a non-issue. Like they had a conversation right about me. We went within ear's reach. It was very rude. So I didn't think anything of it. I was a pretty cocky, confident kid. So I just walked away and went on about my day. So that was Wednesday, I believe, April 14th, 1982. And the reason I narrow it down is because I can look into those weekends and I remember the weather, because it was cold and snowy and rainy. It was like freezing rain that week, and it warmed up on that Saturday into the 60s in Michigan. And the weather report, I went back and looked at the historical weather reports and kind of narrowed it down. It's exactly how I remembered it, that the rains came. It's in the book too. Like it was in the book before I looked at the weather, before I went and looked at the historical weather records. And anyhow, Thursday night, that was Wednesday morning in the cafeteria. And Thursday night, I woke up with ETs in my room. In the middle of the night, I woke up. There was a lot that went on, but, to make a long story short, there was a gray ET in my room and shorter reptilian ETs. And they paralyzed me, and the reptilians came in and grabbed me and carried me to the foot of my bed where there was a flash of light. And I ended up in a laboratory somewhere. It didn't look like a ship. It looked like an underground base. It looked like an underground facility that was carved into rock. And the rooms were rounded. It looked like there was a big gray, like a hallway with a big open space, like an atrium outside the door. And there was interaction. I was terrified at first, and they told me nothing bad was going to happen to me. I was going to be okay. And there was an interaction, and they said they wanted to borrow my consciousness for 20 years. That was exactly what they said, verbatim. And I said, no, I can't do anything for 20 years. I'll go out. I'll miss my parents. I have a family. They said, no, we have time travel. You're going to come right back. And they explained it to me and really sold it as I was going to live longer than I normally would have, that it was a huge blessing. And I agreed to whatever they were going to do. And they did an operation. They set me down and did an operation on me. And I woke up with no knowledge, I woke up with complete amnesia. Like they did their procedure. And the next thing I remember was waking up with complete amnesia. I had no idea of my family, who I was, where I came from. And I was in a place called Inyo, California. And it was a offshoot of Project Grill Flame, of remote viewing research. It was a clandestine sub-project under a contractor. And I found proof of the contractors, and I found proof of that. And the dates match up, April of 82 till January of 83. That's 6 months or so. There's a hole in the program. And there was actually a Senate Joint Arms Committee inquiry as to where they were getting people to participate in the program. So, and I remember it was myself and about 12 other kids just like me, 11 other kids, maybe a dozen kids that were in the same predicament. All of them had amnesia. And the doctor there asked me if I remembered who I was and where I came from, or asked me if I had any memories. And he said, that's because you're a clone. And began his experiments on us. And for the next few months, we went through a trauma-based mind control program. We were tortured, and we watched movies on drugs. They gave us drugs. It was exactly like what you see from other accounts. And then it began to go into remote viewing and psychoenergetic research, where he was giving us drugs and, putting lasers on us and quizzing us, where we'd go out of body and look at targets, remote viewing targets. And then it went into psychoenergetics. He was bringing us to they were giving us drugs and bringing us to near death. And that was the one that worked for me, I guess. And then I was shipped off to Seattle for a couple of weeks to who owned me. I was privately owned. So this was a subcontracted part from the INSCOM project. So, and then I was shipped off to Peru, and it was in the cocaine running business. And I was on flights of cargo of cocaine paste going from a place called Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru, which is now called Boca, Colorado. They've renamed it. Boca, Colorado, Peru, and flights about once a month from there to Santa Marta, Colombia, and we dropped off cocaine. And they would drug me, and during the flight, I was an early warning system. If there were police or bad weather, or they were off course, any of it. And I had no memory of really what was happening. And I would wake up, and the guy that was, my handler or babysitter, whatever we want to call him, would always be shocked. He said the other people would talk through me, and he was getting information from things like I was channeling while I was in that state, near death. I was in a near death state. So that went on for a couple years. I think that answers your question. I'm going into the whole book, so
No,
I'll wait and let you give me a question or two.
No, this is good. I just wanted to bring us back a little bit to the Talented and Gifted program, because the reason that they had you on this plane, the reason that they brought you into all of these programs, is because you did have a special gift, which was a strong psychic ability. Is that correct?
Well, I don't feel that way. I feel that they just threw me in this program. I think that they took a bunch of kids at the same time of year. I think that those people that had access to the program, specifically that boy's father, I think that they were just looking for I try to put myself in their shoes. So what happens if you're somebody that is high up in the corporate level and you have access to these programs, and they say, well, we need people to clone, or we need bodies to put through this program for labor, for kids specifically. So you have your kid in a public school, and every kid that says something rude to them, yep, that one goes, and that one goes. I get my head in there, try to wrap my head around their lifestyle.
But you
And
did
so people that have access to this, what's that?
You did have to pass tests, though, to make it into the program. Once they even got you up there, you had to pass the test, and they said, if you don't pass the test, then we'll send you back, I guess. And
there was a genetic test, exactly. There's genetic markers that not everybody has to participate in the space program. So for what, and I don't know why specifically, I don't know if it's the technology, I don't know if it's a slightly shifted out of phase. There's a lot of theories about it. If it's their travel, the method of travel, that there's a genetic marker. So they tested me and we had to wait for the results, 20, 30 minutes. And it came back and they said just barely. So I could go for once. So people that have a healthy amount of that, whatever that genetics is, according to William Tompkins in his book, can do it twice. But I just had enough for one go. So that's what happened.
Well, and also they had to get your permission. So, I think that in the book you said that the reason you gave them your permission as a young boy to take you into this program is because you believed that you had just experienced first contact and that this was a great moment for Earth.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the next day that we were going to have ETs on the news and it was going to be our disclosure moment, and ETs were real. As a young boy, and in those years, I think it was like Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars, sci-fi was really teeing it up. And if you look at a lot of the sci-fi we have nowadays, it forges your opinion of what this should be. If you were put in that situation, and the resistance needs your help, and they leave off on that for little kids. They show little kids you're going to grow up and join the resistance. We need your help. And so a lot of sci-fi has that kind of undertone. So that little kids, all of a sudden, they're confronted with ETs in a radical environment of technology, and they go, "We need your help." And you go, "Yes, of course, I'll help you." And I thought I was representing us, and that the next day that there would be, that I was going to wake up and on the news there were going to be ETs and I was going to be, part of it. And that wasn't the case. This was an exploit. They were more of a parasitic relationship to our society than anything else, from my perspective.
Right. Well, in your book, you say that they told you different times during this process of bringing you into the programs that you were not going to be hurt, that you would not feel pain, that you would be fine. Were any of these things true?
No. So they said I was in no danger. I was like, and I was like, "Are you going to eat me, or are you guys are you getting ready to kill me? What's up?" And they were, and not only, so looking back on it, not only were they very matter of fact and confident with what they were doing, as if they had done it many, many times. So this wasn't something new. I wasn't the first one to do this. They knew exactly what they had everything ready for my every question. They had an answer waiting. I think that they had control of your like the telepathy. It was all telepathic communication, but I think that through that mode of communicate, they have control of your emotions as well. So I suddenly felt very relaxed, and it's how unnatural would that be for a 10-year-old kid to be taken and wake up and be around ETs and be scared, and then all of a sudden feel emotionally relaxed, and then, okay, yeah, sure. And like there was something that happened. I don't know if it was a drug or telepathic or what, but there was definitely an influence there that really eased my fears.
So they're manipulating your emotions and they're lying to you, and then they say that's a contract.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? A lot of it isn't. So, it's like the military. It's like your military recruiter. If you go, Raz, you're not in the U.S. right now, but the United States. If you're a young boy, if you're 18 and 19 years old and you come across a military recruiter and actually engage them, they promise you the world, and everybody says it's nothing like what they get promised when they go in there. Oh yeah, you're going to have freedom to be a 9-to-5 easy job. You have your choice of places, and we're going to get you a great job. You're going to be a petroleum specialist.
How do you think we can use your knowledge to help humanity and also the specific group of ancient history researchers who are wandering the planet looking for clues to the mysterious history of our planet? What do you think your knowledge, your specific knowledge, can do to help us get out of this matrix? I mean, you know a lot about time. You have a better grasp on what time actually is than the philosophers who talk about time. So maybe that's a place to start. I don't know.
Well, there's a few things. The first thing that always comes up, like even in Chat GPT, I put my name in there and asked, and it always ends up with, there's been no proof. Tony has offered no proof of his experiences. That's the official commentary on my testimony. And the fact is, there's a great deal of proof. I've presented a great deal of proof that's very hard to rebut. So there are many things that I described in detail and then went and found them. And there's no way that, so I was during my time that I was taken. So for people that don't know, we've only gotten into the abduction. We haven't gone the whole 20 years. And then the thing what happened at the end of the 20 years, because the first thing that everybody asks is, well, what about your parents if you were gone? At the end of the 20 years, by whatever exotic technology that they had, they put me back in my original body and back in my original time. And I woke up that Friday morning, April 16th, 1982. I woke up the next morning completely disoriented and completely felt like I had been gone for 20 years with no memory of the 20 years that I had just lived. But I was attracted to adult women all of a sudden. I was 10 years old. I had no idea what sexuality was, but I was all of a sudden had attractions to adult women. I had emotional problems. I had no interest in my toys anymore or playing games with my family. I was a completely different person. I was like slightly matured in a way that didn't make sense. And I felt like I'd been gone. I ran downstairs. My mom called, Tony, get up. It's time for breakfast. And I went downstairs and I gave her a big hug. And because I felt like I hadn't seen her in 20 years. That sensation was there. So what I'm saying is they abduct people and they're gone for an hour, 30 minutes to an hour. But with time dilation and their advanced technologies of age regression or consciousness transfer, whichever it is, they can take you for 20 years and then put you back in time and back in that body. And you're only gone for an hour. And then they've had labor. They've had somebody that could free labor for 20 years, which if you can imagine, is quite valuable. And so that's something that's an important point. You know what I mean? At the beginning of the story, I like to make that known that I woke up the next morning. It was Friday morning. I was a completely different person. I just withdrew from school. I was no longer in the top 5%. I withdrew from school. There was a massive wake in the event. After this event, there was a massive hole in my life after this event. So people ask me, how can I protect my kids from this? And like I said, with the sci-fi, they're training kids to say yes. What you get what I'm saying? When you watch these movies, you watch where the movies leave off, and I don't want to say one and get a lawsuit. But a lot of these science fiction movies say, you're gonna be the new star pilot. Like the movies leave off. It's always the kid as a character that gets taken and does all these adventures, and it's this wonderful thing. They glamorize it. So that if you are one of these kids that are taken and sit in the same chair that I did and ask the same question, you go, of course, I'll stand, I'm ready for the challenge. So you're programmed already. So my advice to parents that want to protect their kids is teach your kids to say no. The other thing is young kids don't have a lot of empowerment to say no. It's time for bed. Oh, I don't want to go to bed. Oh, you're going to bed. So they don't get to say no. And their no's don't carry weight. So there has to be a way parents have to tell them that, you got to listen to mom and dad, but strangers you can feel free to say no to and make it stick. Empower your children to say no. For the people that are researching, I really believe in the scientific method, right? So science says once you get one piece of improvable thing, then you can go look for the other. But I think it's it's like walking around with your eyes closed, reaching like this. The scientific method is reaching for the next nearest piece of evidence. And the testimony that I've put forward, the evidence I've put forward, and many others that overlap in testimony is a huge pile of evidence that science ignores. And so science is poking around, waiting for like a piece of a flying saucer or a ray gun or some physical evidence. And even then we have physical evidence, they ignore it. The reality is that you have to take these testimonies and then look at it from the top down. So, okay, these ETs are here, they've been here siphoning us for labor all along. What are they doing to remain hidden? What are they doing? Look at the situation of your research from the eyes of an advanced race that has time travel, invisibility, you name it. An advanced race that has all these things, like where would they hide the evidence? What would they do? And then, like that's what I would recommend to the researchers just don't take that into account. They're waiting on. Also, if you are in a black program, it's illegal to have physical evidence. You'll go to jail. You'll immediately go to jail. It's literally on. This is a law that's on the books. So if I had physical evidence, if I took a picture and brought you a picture of me standing arm in arm with a short reptilian, I would go to jail and there would be no evidence. So if people that are harping, like, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? It's like, the evidence is the people that are missing that's come forward. And
Well,
there
I
are
want to
quite a
make
few. There are hundreds.
I think I should make it clear to our audience that one of the many ways that the secret space program hides the fact of their existence is by doing mind wipes of their recruits. And so after 20 years, they wipe their memories, and only a very few begin to recover those memories. And many of them don't recover all of their memories, just bits and pieces. But Tony was unusual in that he said, even as they were trying to wipe his memories, he said, I'm going to remember everything. He said that to himself and to them over and over and over. And when he got back, there was a time when he began to remember. And we are blessed to receive all of that amazing intel from his time in these programs. Now, you had another program. So there was a time dilation program, and then there was one within that program that was another time dilation program of 11 years. And that's what Project Starmaker talks about, is your time in a program where you were working, doing manual labor, helping to build a star. And what they said, what in your book, you said that they were layer by layer, element by element, gas by gas. The Bureau was building a survival star. Can you tell people what that means?
So that's where my account gets confusing. So Project Starmaker, all of that experience, I never really spoke about because it gets very confusing. So if you think in terms of consciousness, what it seems like is that I was a person with a whole consciousness, and then they take half of it, whether a clone body or some other technology, a clone. And there's two of me living for 20 years, and it's capped at 20 years. So after that, there's a great risk to the original person of health. So there's a law in place. They have to put you back in 20 years. So they take my consciousness, split it in half, and it drives a clone. And 20 years. But somewhere in there, they took half of my consciousness and split that in half and drove in Starmaker. They sold it to an ET species, and I was put in an artificial body of an adolescent of that species and kept at 13 years old or so, like kept at a very young age mentally, because my consciousness was split so many times because it was diluted. At least that's how it felt. So that's my best guess. That's just my best guess. The reason I come to that conclusion is because when I was put back from the whole thing, and I went through my life, like I dropped out of school. I was no longer a student. I was no longer an outstanding student the next day in 82. And I lived the years. And at the end of the 20-year term, when the other me basically died and was put back, I got it back. Like I woke up one day and felt like $1 million and got my life together. And I was emotionally healthy. Like everything just snapped. So that's what I mean. Like my mental faculty was lessened while I was gone, while there were two of me. And the same thing in Starmaker. But in that case, they were selling us off. They were trading us for technology with an advanced race that was in another galaxy. And they were in a galaxy that has a very low star forming numbers versus a healthy spiral galaxy has star formation happening all the time. This was like a ball galaxy, and the star formation was lacking. The galaxy was going to die out faster, and they were using stars. They would put rings and stations around stars and harvesting the energy. And so they had a lot of material, physical material, gaseous nebulas and things in that galaxy that had failed to become stars, and they were arranging for stars to be built. So that story I know is very hard to get your head around in layman's terms for a lot of people. So I didn't want to confuse, and the time travel aspect is confusing. But basically I was taken for 10 years out of, here's my timeline, and I was taken for 20 years and then put back. And in that 20 years, I was taken for 10 years and put back. And but Jackie Kenner, my book editor and co-author, who's very, very talented, I could have not wrote the books without her. She would ask me privately after we talked on camera or when we were talking about the book, she said, how do you know that? How do you even know that? And I said, well, from Peru, my times in Peru, when they put me under, I got in touch with like my higher self, and I was like accessing these memories. That's when it all happened, was the out of body stuff in Peru. And it coincided with a lot of things that she had experienced in her work. She's a psychic medium. She's had her own experiences that are completely, and so when two people describe something from two different aspects that shouldn't be, you have to take note of it. Like I always say, like, just somebody saying they were abducted by aliens isn't enough. But if they say I was abducted by aliens and I was in a room and there was a bowl of grapefruit in the room, you go, okay, whatever, that's great. And then they put me back. And then somebody a year later from the other side of the world that has no contact says, yeah, I was abducted by aliens. So the room was like octagon, but there was a bowl of grapefruit. So when you see a overlapping testimony that they have no communication with each other, you have to accept that as evidence. There's just no way that works out. And that's the case. That's what I mean that mainstream science is ignoring. But Jackie was the same thing. And when we talked privately, she said, Tony, this is the story you should write. This is the story you need to tell. The near-death experience, the repeated, the way that works, this is your story you should tell. And I said, there's not much there, and it's very vague, it's very distant, it's very hard to remember. And so we put out Series Colony Cavalier first, and then she insisted, kind of, let's do that book next. This is a short book. Project Star Maker happens between pages 252 and 253 of Series Colony Cavalier. So it's really part of that story that just, I didn't want to mess with it while we were doing the book.
I want to make clear to our audience that testimonials from people are evidence. So science does not want to admit that testimonials are evidence. Whether the evidence is compelling or not is up to the people who hear the testimonial. But when you have corroborating testimonials, that makes both of those testimonials more compelling. So I just want to bring that notion into the scientific community that testimonials are evidence. If you live in a tribe and you walk along a trail and there's a cliff there, and you see that if you keep going on that trail, you're going to fall down and kill yourself on the rocks below, you go back to your tribe and you tell them a story, you give them a testimonial, and you help them to understand that that trail is not a good trail to walk on because you're going to die. So that's good evidence because you saw that cliff edge with your own eyes, right? So this is what Tony is doing. He's giving his testimonial of what he saw, what he experienced, what he felt, what has been said to him, who he met, the races that he met, so he can give detailed evidence about that. And then another Secret Space Program insider who has a story to tell, a testimonial to give to humanity at his or her own peril, he tells his story, he gives his testimonial, and when we see that they agree on certain points, then we come to begin to believe them. Because the first one who tells a story that's crazy like that, we're not going to believe them. But when there's 100 people with corroborating testimonials, it's like this mesh, this net that comes together, and it's a very strong net of evidence. And I want the scientific community to get off their ass and start to realize that testimonials are evidence. Now, in Series Colony Cavalier, Tony, you went to many different places. You were on the Earth. You were serving on the Earth for a few years. Then you were serving on the moon. Then you were on the moon for a short time. Then you were on Ceres. Now, in your time on Earth, you went to various locations. And when you got back from that program, and you're recovering from this bizarre thing that you went through, and then you were growing up in this timeline, the natural timeline, you began to think maybe I should revisit those locations. So what have you found in the last year?
Great, thanks. Firstly, that was well said. Thank you, Jock. No, the burden of evidence is always on me. And the thing is, most people in the community are very supportive. They're like, we believe you. You don't got to keep proving it. the fact is you do have to keep proving it. I'm justifying it to myself as well. Like there's a great deal of me that doesn't want this to be true. The things I remember, they were terrible. I witnessed terrible things. Anybody that doesn't know my story or hasn't read the book, be warned, it is not a PG book. I was treated brutally at times. There was times when it was okay, where I reached an established kind of lifestyle, but I was treated very badly. But the burden of proof was on me, and fortunately, so thousands of people have reached out to me saying the same thing. So when we talk about overlap, we're in the thousands of people that say that they've experienced something similar or the same thing. So it's a big phenomenon for so far, and it's only begun. But yeah, so I was fortunate that I was on Earth in the beginning. Like I said, because I was not taken because of my merit, I was taken as a punishment. They take that kid, go. And so they just threw me in any program. And then when I was no longer useful in that program, they would sell me, or lease, whatever they did, they were selling me to another program. And when I was then eventually they sent me into space, to the space programs, when I was old enough. So those places, I imagine this experience. Have you ever heard of the town of Buckley, Michigan? So it's north of me where I live. Never heard of it. You've never seen it on the map. Exactly. So imagine tomorrow if you woke up and you remembered living there for 2 years. What you would feel like. Imagine it, right? And you go, oh, I remember this town. It was called Buckley. There's a little gas station, and there's like this restaurant there. That's weird. I remember I was abducted and I lived there. And then you go, well, okay. And you look on the map and you find it. And it's exactly how you remember it. So that's what happened to me. That's exactly the experience. I woke up one day with memories of living in Seattle, living in Inyo, California, living in Peru. And I had detailed memories, like not just a little bit. I'd lived there for periods of years. So, I had a great deal of memory. And I found them on the map, and I had to digest the fact that I was really starting to remember things that were real. And if what I remembered on Earth was true, then the space memories were real too. I really wanted to go to Peru. Peru was the one place that I felt at home, that I actually had a bit of a family atmosphere and was actually treated, close to a family atmosphere. So a normal human, emotionally nurturing kind of lifestyle. That was the only place that I had that. Everywhere else, it was like being an orphan. So I always wanted to go back to Peru, but that place in Peru, which has since been renamed, and another town 12 miles east has been renamed to the town in my book, and they put a historical landmark there that is not me, that is not the correct place. So then begging a revision of my book now. Puerto Tawantinsuyo was what it was called, and now it's called Boca, Colorado, Peru, in the Madre de Dios region of Peru. So that existed, but I haven't been there. So that's the one place I haven't. The other two places were Inyo, California, where I first woke up, the very first place I woke up after the abduction, and Seattle. So one of the islands near Seattle. And I kind of keep it anonymous because there's real people involved. The people that, there's real people involved, and it's like poking the hornet's nest. So I don't go around touting, say, see, it was them, get them. But I went there immediately in 2016. And just to see if it would, what's the word? Inspire new memories. It would jog my memory to go there and to prove it to myself, to see, because I remembered quite a bit, and I drove it exactly how I remember going there. I took the ferry to the island, and I could tell places that were new since then. I said, oh, that wasn't there. I had that much recall. Oh, that's boot. I remember the gas stations being small, and then I go back now, and they're big gas stations, the truck stop size. They've been built, they've been upgraded. And that was memory. And then I went to the house. I knew my way to the house better than the Google Maps took me. I went to the local store. I knew my way around on the inside of the store. I knew the history of the store that was right down the street. The history of some of the places in the town, and then to the beach, to the lighthouse. I knew my way around. I knew where the rocks were on the beach. I knew things that there is no way. And like I have witnesses, I have a dozen witnesses my whole entire life that can vouch. I've never been to Seattle up until 2016 when I went there. And I was a damn fool and went by myself. I should have documented it. And when I went in 16, there would have been very, very compelling evidence if I would have documented the experience of calling out what's coming up around a street corner that I've never seen. So that was in 2016. I went back to Seattle last year to get footage for my presentations because I've been invited to speak in live presentations, and I've got a few coming up this following year. And so to get footage, I went back to Seattle to the island, went with friends, and they vouched for me. We didn't need GPS. I knew my way around it pretty well. I'd already been there in 2016, but I still had a great deal of knowledge, intimate knowledge of the place. And then a month later, I went with Tyler of Journey to Truth podcast, and I was like, this time I need somebody to film. And we went to Inyokern, which turned out to be the Naval Ordnance Testing Station. So next to China Lake. It's a public airport now, but there are buildings there that are designated special district that don't exist on the national database of structures with tax assessments. So there's 3 buildings, and that's exactly where I remember. But I said, those aren't the buildings. I said it in 2017 when I saw it on Google Earth. I said, those aren't the buildings. I remember portables. There were portable. There was one big one that we slept in. They had beds in. And there was another one that they had chairs hanging from the ceiling. We'd get in, we'd watch movies. They'd drug us, and we'd watch movies on a reel-to-reel. And they would rewind. We'd just keep watching these movies that were kind of sick, like programming us. And then there was a nurse's station, a smaller building. And I remember portables, like we have portables that you go to school in. That's what I remembered. So now in the same place where there's like garages, buildings that they built there. And I said, that's not them. So Tyler and I went there, and we got into Ridgecrest late at night. We got an Airbnb and stayed. And then the next morning we went there, and I didn't expect to find the buildings. I went in, I said, look, there's a portable, there's proof. There was a portable that I didn't recognize. I said, there's proof that they have portables here. So I remember portables, and here's one. I said, and we drove around, we were taking pictures and flying drone shots and stuff. I said, well, let's just take a peek in the window. And it was the exact portable. It was the place I woke up. It was the first place that I woke up after so I was abducted by ETs, put on their little base, their base, wherever it was, put under, and woke up with amnesia. And I found the exact place, and I returned to that spot and filmed it. And Tyler filmed the whole thing. He's got my genuine reaction on camera. But we went in there and it got that. And then I said, well, there was 2 others, the nurse's station and the other building. And we looked around, and sure enough, there's a wreckage of a building that measures about the same as I remember that was burnt. So they took it and condemned it, the one with the chairs, because it had leaks and things. It wasn't a sound building. The one that we slept in, they kept, and I've seen where they moved it over and made a computer station out of it, computer center, and then moved it to where it sits now. And then I found small old 1970s, 1960s looking campers that were the nurse's station. I remember from the air conditioning units that were on the top roof of it, they had coolers in it where they were keeping our food, and the other place was a first aid station. So all the buildings I remember that I called out were confirmed. There were many other things, like I was telling my way. Tyler was a witness. I was telling him my way around the town. Like we go up here, and I remember up here, and we went out in the desert. We went all around the area. We drove around we were there for 2 days. And explored it quite a bit. And then we went to a local restaurant, and we got leaned on. So the local restaurant, we walked in, there was nobody there, and a guy said, here's your seat, guys. And he had our places set for us. We literally, I've never had this happen. We walked into it was like a breakfast, like a mom and pop's place. And the guy looked like, the owner or the manager. He goes, here's your seats, guys. Big restaurant, empty tables everywhere. And he had the fork and the menus laying there. And here's your seat. And we said, oh, it's like you. And Tyler said, oh, it's like you're expecting us. And he didn't acknowledge it. He just. But where he sat us, put us right across the bar from a very large man who stared at us intimidatingly the whole time. Looked like a military guy, and he just stared at us the entire time. And then guys came in and sat. Instead, like imagine a giant restaurant with empty booths everywhere. And guys came in and, sit anywhere, guys. And they sat right next to us so they could listen to us. And, it was like we were surrounded by military personnel. They were letting us know that we were, that they knew that we were there. And so the rest of the trip, we didn't telegraph it and say in range of electrical, like on listen to the phone. Because we had said, hey, let's go to this place. Let's head there in a minute. We'll leave after when we get ready to go, in an hour or so. So they had noticed. So the rest of the trip there, we said, hey, let's go to this place. And at the last minute, we'd pick somewhere else so that they couldn't pre-position. And it was creepy. It was a very creepy feeling. That whole town of Ridgecrest, California I believe that entire town is one big military experiment, really. There's a lot of things there. It's like being in the Twilight Zone. The vibe there is just terrible. But the evidence, there was a lot of things that turned up from that. And then I went back and started really researching what I remember. And turns out I found a paper trail that has all of it has a hole in it because it was secret. It was kids that were clones from working with ET level program from April of 82 to January of 83. Through the 6 months there, or however long that is, nine months. That all of that testing, and there was this kind of a hubbub during that time with this the Senate Joint Arms Committee. The whole subject came up, and then it proliferated. It was successful, and they didn't no longer after that. In January of 83, they canceled Grill Flame and they called it Project Center Lane, and they no longer called it remote viewing. They called it psychoenergetics, and that proliferated into the Gateway. Project Gateway, and then Project Stargate, and then was eventually canceled. But it wasn't canceled. I guarantee it went underground. And I believe our special forces are using remote viewing, and a lot of our branches of the military use remote viewing. It's very easy to remote view. In fact, I teach a remote viewing class now based on what I remember from that and what I've learned researching, the paper trail. Remote viewing is very easy to do, and anybody can do it.
Well, you have a Patreon, and it's Talks with Tony, and people can join along with your classes, right? Your remote viewing classes?
That's right. There's a few, and we have a remote influencing class that's I keep it smaller. And then I do a small show. I've had you on there in the past. I don't do it as often as I'd like, a couple a month, and then I do a Q&A there. But Patreon has been a really good thing for researching it and places. It's more of a family than anything right now, and it's been doing well lately. The remote viewing, some people come in and they've already have experience, so that come into the Patreon, they already have experience of remote viewing and they expect one thing, and it's not like that. We're trying to get in touch with I'm not remote viewing advanced target or aggressive targets. Other people come in and they go, man, I just want to see what this is about. I don't think I'll ever do this. And, I'm just popping in to see. And in a couple of weeks, they're getting accurate hits on the targets. So it's targeting. It's about practice versus technique. I think practice is more important than technique to a certain extent. And anybody can do it. It's amazing to open the target at the end of the day, at the end of the class, and people find out that they were right all along. They think it was they're describing one thing. They have all these aspects, and then I show the target, and it's not what they were thinking in their mind, but all the aspects are on the target. And some of them are very accurate. Some of them are extremely accurate I'm talking about drawing pictures of the target. And it's a random, all they get is a set of numbers. So it's a very impressive thing. But we're looking into other things. The psychoenergetics, where they left off, they classified the program, but ultimately, when they were going for funding, they said, what are the aspects we're going to research with this new funding? And it was remote influencing, altering dimensionality at the target site, teleportation of things at the target site. There were many things, changing the perception of time for people at the target. So psychoenergetics really had a lot of potential. And then after that, they got the funding, and then they classified it and said, nope, it doesn't, nothing to see here. And then they made the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats, so that you laugh at it, so that there's a giggle fact. These guys are crazy, running into walls and stuff. They made it look goofy, but the reality is completely other than that. It was wildly successful. They've unlocked a lot of psychoenergetic abilities that we all have. And in fact, there's actually an active campaign to make you think that you don't have these abilities, that there's more coincidence than anything.
Well, for people who don't believe in remote viewing or aren't sure if they want to go there, if the secret space program controllers can hide a secret space program for decade after decade after decade, what else could they hide? Maybe they could hide from us our own abilities. And maybe we do have the natural ability to be telepathic. Maybe we do have the natural ability to remote view and to remote influence, as Tony has said. I haven't really heard that term before, remote influencing, but I do know the term blind target, which is what is given to people for remote viewing purposes, because if you influence them with any information about their target, then you can't be sure of the results being true. So you give them a blind target, which is just, it's basically coordinates. Is that correct?
They get just a set of random numbers. And people think coordinates like they're going to get longitude. They did originally give coordinates on the map to the viewer and then let the viewer look at it. Like that's the original experiments. They were actual longitude and latitude coordinates. Since then, they got rid of that. It's just a random set of numbers. I have a 3-digit number and a 3-digit number, and that's what I give to the people. And the target is not a location every time. So they don't just randomly go, oh, I see water, I get water, and then there's a blue sky, like that's everywhere already. It's not like that. Sometimes the target is a microbe or an element, an atom. The target is small, it's an insect. Sometimes it's a planet far away. It's a Jupiter or a Ganymede. Sometimes it is a location. Most of the time it's a place that's well known because those are easy to key up on, but I keep it completely random. One time it was nothing. The envelope was empty. So the idea is I want them to know that it could be anything. I don't want them to ever get front loaded and expect something. We have done missing persons. So we have like a rated R PG rating on the targets so that they can opt out if they don't want to see something terrible. And we have done things like that, and they're unsettling because they start to remote view these things, and after a while there's no way that you could call it coincidence. They're so accurate. And then I average the score. I have a score system, and I average the score of the group every week, and you get 1 or 2 low scores in the group and you get 1 or 2 high ones. And I don't discard them. I add it all up and average it. And every single week we beat the probability of 1 in 250,000. So that's a 15 score, and we beat that. It's very rare. Out of 10 times, we might one time be under 15.
Right.
And so there's no way that there's a coincidence we've done targets where they literally drew me a picture of the target. And so how do you guess that? When 1 week it's an insect, and the next week it's Jupiter, and the next week it's something else, and they're hitting the targets every time. So this is an ability that everybody has.
Well, Margie K, who's also been interviewed on Journey to Truth podcast, and you've been interviewed on their podcast many times. She helps police departments solve crimes, and she's done that many, many, many times, and she does it for free. So she uses her remote viewing power to solve crimes for them that they can't solve. So it's not like this is far out. Police departments are using her talents, which we all have this ability. It's just a question of accessing it.
Consider this. Why would it be classified? Why wouldn't they teach us this in school? Why wouldn't they tell it in the mainstream? Consider this. A group of special forces are in a town in Iraq in a firefight, and there's a sniper, and they're pinned down, and they get out. 3 of them get out and create their target. What building is the sniper in? And they remote view it. And their probability is very high because they have military grade remote viewing techniques, which involve chemicals. That's what's going on. So I've had people that are witnesses that have been in Afghanistan that said there was somebody along with some civilian that came with them, and he'd go in a room for a few hours and they'd come out and say, no, we got to go that way. And they say, no matter what, don't let that guy die. He's going to tell you what to do the mission. And the mission works every single time. There are declassified documents during the Iran crisis back in the 70s. During that time, there was a team of remote viewers assigned to the special forces. There are documents I found on the CIA declassifiedlibrary.gov, and I've poured through documents. I spend a great deal of time reading these things. There was a team of 12 remote viewers assigned to that theater of military theater with the special forces. So they had a team of guys that were remote viewing, and then they had special forces in the field. There was a submarine that went, a nuclear submarine that went missing in the Pacific. So that remote viewing team got retasked and got shipped out to the California or somewhere to work on that recovery for this. And during that time, that special forces team suffered great losses. So they had material loss. When they pulled the team off, the remote view team off, and put them in another theater, the actual troops on the ground started getting their ass kicked. So this is documented. This is the military. This is it. So that's one aspect of why it's classified and why they don't officially acknowledge it. The other is that I found there was a great deal of research of remote influencing, where they had a remote viewer, remote influencing a soldier that was in a military hospital, trying to make him heal him.
I found recently that there is one guy condemned for using remote influencing, and this guy, his name is Dan Voiculescu. He is the owner of a media conglomerate, and he somehow closed a big deal that his adversaries were kind of against, and they were all wondering how did he manage to do this. And in the case, there are a lot of witnesses telling how this they name it telepathic ability. So he said that Dan Voiculescu used telepathy, which is pretty much remote influencing, to influence their decisions in the contract. So basically, using telepathy, he made all the parts involved, and there were about 10 people or so. So he kind of influenced them all to sign the deal that wasn't, supposed to happen. And so they had a judge see over the case, and the authorities actually won against him in all 4 instances, including at the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court.
And for the judge to do that, it had to be a really bad deal. It had to be obviously a really bad deal.
Yeah, so it's curious how when this evidence surfaces and it actually serves the system, how they can, accuse somebody and actually have, an official case. They can win an official case based only on this accusation, which, nobody would take serious. But then,
suddenly they didn't need scientific proof, right? Suddenly they didn't need. Suddenly, what do you call it? Eyewitness testimony had weight when there was money involved.
So 10 witnesses, and they could close the case, on this assumption. So it's pretty incredible how we have like hundreds, tens of thousands, maybe, of people that have been abducted and have spoken about their experiences, and they're still not accepting this. They're still dismissing those kind of cases.
Well, Tony,
I
know you're busy. You have lots to do, so we're going to wrap this up. So we can have you talk for as long as you want, and then I know you have to go. But I just wanted to let people know that you've got Patreon Talks with Tony. Please tell us your other links, and then whatever you'd like to say to the ancient history researchers who are wandering the globe looking for clues, but not realizing that we are not the first advanced race. We're the last, and we're not that advanced. We live in a universe teeming with advanced races who, for their own reasons, have not made themselves apparent to all of us in 2023, but may be doing that soon in 2024, full disclosure. So let's hear your final thoughts and any links you want to give us.
A couple things. I just want to finish that one point on the remote influencing, how it was born. They were taking soldiers in a military hospital and having a team of remote influencers experiment trying to heal the soldier. And then everybody involved in the hospital was unaware. So the doctor and the nurses would get a report, and then they had access, could read the report. So they could monitor if they were successful or not. And they did. They were able to immediately reduce swelling, and like they could see physically that they were having an effect. And then the research went into making the injury worse to try to slow the healing of soldiers that were in the hospital, unbeknownst to them and the doctor and the nurses. Nobody was in, because they had access. They could just read the daily report and see if they had If there was a spike, he woke up at 3 a.m. when the guys were in the room doing the influencing at 3 a.m. And then the nurse was there. Oh, he had something in the middle of the night. He had swelling and he was in pain. And they eventually said, the paperwork said it like this, that many men had more of an effect, that many remote influence working in a team had a greater effect, and that they felt that they could induce heart attack. And so murder somebody at a distance with a team of remote influencers. And then the project was canceled. And what by canceled, I mean that then the project was classified at a higher clearance level and continued in a black project that was not public and not declassified now. So that's remote influencing. That was the birth of the remote influencing the United States military. So that's the level of things that you can do when you get a bunch of people. That's where my tier 3, that's where the Patreon group, but we don't hurt people. We've had great results helping people. We've had bang up results in healing people, members, and we can see it the very next day. One girl had COVID on Monday. We did the meeting on Wednesday and she was fine on Thursday. So we've had great results. And I'm not really documenting it like scientifically, it's for us, but there's a lot of things. Once you open that door, there's a lot that you can do. You can find everything at TonyRodrigues.com. So my name all together with an S on the end.com, and that links to the Patreon and other interviews I've done. The books are there. I have a memory course. I have the remote influencing course is in a course called the Purple Series that's available. And you can just buy that course and look at it. And I don't even know what we charge for it. Jackie runs all that. But it's like a teachable, it's like 5 or 6 hours, and it tells you how to do the remote. You can do it for yourself and change your life. It works. There's a lot of ancient practices that work along the same lines, just not quite with the modern things that we know. And it works. And then the Patreon, my show is all on there. Talks with Tony, it's called. And all those things are available. You should be able to find it all at TonyRodrigues.com. I'm currently working on 2 new books. One is going to be something like the brief history of remote viewing. And then the other book will be The End of the Night. It's the sequel. It's the trilogy. Oh, the other thing for the people researching, if the United States military wanted to go into the Amazon and abduct somebody out of an uncontacted tribe and put them back without any memory of what happened and study them, we could put cameras all around that tribe. We'd know everywhere they were. We have infrared. We have radical technology compared to an uncontacted tribe. And that is actually the situation in reverse. We are the natives without technology, and the ETs are the people with infrared and cameras. They are that far ahead of us as we are ahead of those people, and it's actually very easy. And we have enough overlapping testimony from people over decades, so over many decades, and it goes all the way back into history. I mean, when you get into even religious texts, if you look at them from the top down as ETs abducting people and using the technology that I described, it's been going on the whole time, and it'd be very easy. How hard would it be to hide your presence if you had time travel and radical technology and invisibility and all these things? So just as far, even more far that we are from an Aboriginal tribe living in the woods still uncontacted, that's how far they are ahead of us, and they are exerting their force on us, especially with influences within our own society. Our governments and our academia are influenced at the top, so they're setting policies that make it hard for us to find them. So that's what I'd say to those guys.
So for people researching pyramids, maybe we could broaden our perspective a bit and realize that it's possible that in the past, very, very advanced races visited Earth, gave us some technology, built some things, warred, interbred, genetically tinkered with us and other life forms, brought life forms here. Maybe they built mountains. We don't know for sure, but maybe we could broaden our perspective to at least ask that question. Is what I'm looking at natural or artificial? Might be a question we ask when we go out onto the terrain of Terra. So Tony Rodrigues, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I know Raz was excited also to have you on. We're both megalithic researchers, but we feel it's important to broaden our perspective, and we really thank you for doing that for us today, Tony.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I'm
Thank you,
happy
sir.
to meet you. Happy to be here.